All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Doing something a little different here. Fun little video in between the guide stuff. I've been talking about this for a while because I think it's going to be impactful. So far, it seems to have been impactful, and I wanted to discuss it since it's popped up as a topic in not only streams. I know it's been a while, but I've mentioned it in streams as well as those little update videos that I've been doing with like matches and whatnot. But I have this guy right here, the Victrix Pro BFG. So I ordered this thing back in September-ish, somewhere around there, and it kept getting delayed. But I was really excited for it because it looks awesome, and I'll explain that here in a few. But it's it took forever to get here, and then when it finally got here, it arrived. Literally, the delivery guy dropped it off a few minutes before I was leaving the house on a trip. So it got here technically at the end of January. What, I can't even remember what the date would have been, the 18th, 19th, something like that. And then I didn't even really get to use it or do anything with it until this month, until February. Now I've put a few weeks of time into it at this point, so I think I feel good enough to give a review, and I will explain, why I think it's important, at least for me and my channel, obviously, since it's my channel. So I will save you guys, the spoilers. We'll just get this out of the way, but I will give this thing, or I am giving this thing, an 8 out of 10. Okay, but I think that it could easily be a 10 out of 10 if they do a couple of things. So first, a little bit of background, and then I'll go over the specifics of the controller and kind of show you some stuff. In fact, I should probably grab the case for it because this will have stuff in it that's relevant here in a minute. But so I am one of those unfortunate people who has been in a controller crisis for a while. When I originally started playing Tekken, PlayStation was still the thing, and my first competitive Tekken was Tekken Tag, and that was on the PS2. Now, at the time, arcades were still a thing, and you could still go to arcades to play, but, it was becoming easier for people to get a console and just play at home on a console, and I didn't have a ton of money to just go to an arcade, and I was still young at the time, so I didn't have a ton of money or time to go to an arcade and just dump tons of time and money into an arcade machine to learn it. So I had to, by necessity, had to use a console. So I wasn't a stick player, so I didn't play stick. I could play on a stick a little bit, so when I went to the arcade, I wasn't a total bum. But most of my practice and how I developed my skills was on a pad. So my favorite pad of all time was the original DualShock 1, and I used it forever because even when the PS3 came out, there were converters for the PS3 that were really good, and you could still use PS1 or PS2 pads. Now, the irony of that is that even though that's my favorite controller of all time, I don't know if I could ever go back to it. And the reason is because of the 6-button layout. Ever since I started using a controller with a 6-button layout, the game has just changed a lot, and with button binds and stuff like that, I think that I just need a 6-button from here on out. So unless they made a DualShock 1 that was almost a carbon copy but just had a 6-button layout, which of course will never happen, I don't know if I could even go back to that. But anyway, those converters, they started to not work, and I'm sure that you can find them, converters, somewhere. And I mean, you can certainly use a PC and various PC software to use DualShock 1 and DualShock 2s or whatever. But it's just not, it started to not be a thing because the converters just weren't working, and then the companies that had the best converters stopped making them or maybe even went out of business. So you had to move on. Like, there just came a point where PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 controllers just couldn't work anymore, and they weren't USB. Remember, this was before the time of USB, so they had the special thing. I wish I had one here to show you, but I'm sure most of you guys know what the original plugins for the PS1 and PS2 looked like. And PS3 was USB, which is why you needed the converter. So once everything started going that direction, you had to move on. You had to find something else. And for a variety of reasons, there are certain design aspects of the DualShock 3 and DualShock 4 and even DualShock 5 controllers that I absolutely hate. I cannot use them for competitive purposes. So I needed to find a new thing. And ever since then, I've been jumping around from this controller to that controller, just trying to do my best to find something that would at least allow me to play. And eventually I did find a good controller that I liked, that I was using for a long time, and that was the Hori. It's FC4. What was it standing for? Fight Commander or Fighting Commander 4. And that had a 6-button layout. And it was an excellent design. It's probably even better than this. I think that the aesthetics of this are probably better, but functionality as far as like holding the controller, and for me, I play with the controller sitting on my lap or my leg. So that original design for the FC4 was amazing. It was fantastic. But there two problems came up with that. The first is that they were extremely cheap in terms of, I guess, whatever materials they were using for them. So they broke down really easy, and you had to like keep buying them every once in a while. But they weren't super expensive, which was the good news. The problem is that eventually they changed the design. So if you go out right now to Amazon or wherever and you try to buy a Hori Fight Commander 4, and they might even have a new version out now, but it's not the original design. It looks more like a regular controller with kind of like the BFG, where you have the handles on both sides. The original design did not have that on where the buttons were. Like this was cut off, so it was kind of like flattened, and it makes for a much better grip if you play claw style. So once they made that change, it was only a matter of time before you couldn't get the old design. The old designs would be gone. You know, they weren't manufacturing them anymore. And you can even see now, if you go onto like eBay and try to get the original design for the FC4, it's really expensive. I think they've probably eclipsed like $150 or so now just to get that. So it's just long term, it was not viable. So once again, I was thrown into a controller crisis, and I've been doing my best, more or less just using old Horis, the FC4s, and even though the buttons and the D-pad and stuff are going out, I just didn't have anything better. So it's been a frustrating experience ever since they did that, because I don't think I've purchased a new FC4 for at least a year and a half, maybe even longer. So what I was using was really worn down. And I'm sure a lot of you have this problem. If you use a controller that is really worn down, not working, buttons sticking, the corners are going out on the D-pad, whatever it is, it's an extremely frustrating experience, because half the time you don't even feel like you're playing the game. You're just fighting with the controller to get it to do what you want it to do. So the reason that I was excited about this thing is because, and I guess we can just jump into the features on this thing, is that it's modular. So that I don't know if I've seen another controller like this. There probably are some out there that allow limited replacement of the various pieces on the controller. But this thing, if you look at it, there are these two essentially face pieces. One that has like the D-pad and the analog stick, and I popped this off, which I can talk about here in a second. And then you have the buttons. So these are two different pieces, and you can swap them out. Like you can kind of see on there. I'm not going to do it just to save time, but there's these little, screws in here, and all you have to do, they give you a little screwdriver. It's just a little thing, and takes a whole 30 seconds. You unscrew it, you take out the piece, and then you put it back in. And then they do have extra pieces. So this is obviously not the one I'm using, but this is kind of what they look like. So they're just like little rectangular pieces, and they work both ways. So like if you wanted it, so this would be on the button side, right? So you could have it like this, or you could, switch it like that. It works both ways. But the reason that got me excited is because not only do they have the 6-button layout, but if those buttons start to go out, then I can just swap them. Now they as far as I can tell, or as far as I've seen, they haven't put like spare pieces of these up for sale yet. But I have to imagine it's just a matter of time. Like, that would be so weird to have a controller like this and not sell the spare parts for those modular pieces. So it's just a matter of time. Or, you know, maybe if I haven't needed to yet, but maybe you can just email customer service and maybe they'll charge you just a whatever to send out a replacement piece for it. But whatever it is, that's awesome. Like, that solves one of the big problems that anybody has with a controller that they're using, that they're putting a lot of time into, right? Is if something goes out, rather than replace this whole thing, I can just buy one of the modular pieces and pop out the old one, the busted one, put in the new one, and I'm right back into it. The second problem that I've had with controllers is the D-pad. So this is the thing that's really thrown me into a crisis, is because, as you can see, it's like the old Nintendo style, right? Where it's actually one piece. Like, if you look at a DualShock, I actually think I have a PS3 controller here. You notice how there's no middle. There's no middle, right? It's just these pieces. And this layout is fine too. There's no problem with that layout, but I prefer this one. And it's hard to find a good D-pad on third-party controllers. That's one of the things that was great about the FC4, is that it was a super good pad, for D-pad specifically. So it felt really comfortable. The inputs were great, yada, yada, yada. But I just haven't been able, aside from the DualShocks, which I hate using DualShocks now. It was just really hard to find a controller that had a good D-pad that felt good with my thumb and was giving me the inputs that I wanted. So this thing so far has been really good. So that accomplishes the second thing. So right now, the two big things that I wanted, the 6-button layout and a good D-pad, A plus, like, it's accomplishing that. And then, since they can presumably, I could buy spare parts for this, I don't have to buy a full unit. I can just, when these start to go out, I can just buy spare parts, pop them back in, and we're good. So for me, it's been a dream so far. This is why I like this controller, and I give it a really high grade. Now, the reason that's not 10 out of 10, and I'll go into this, there are tons of awesome things about this. Like the case that it comes in, it's a hard case, so it's a very nice case if you're traveling. It comes with a bunch of spare parts. I showed you, the one extra modular piece, but it has, it can go wired or wireless, and I should actually show you this, because I play wired, and if you're in a tournament setting, you will definitely want to play wired. But it's a nice thick wire that they give you. This piece goes into the back of the controller, and then it's just, a USB from there. But you can also, of course, because they give you the USB dongle in here, you can play it. You can play it wireless if you want to. And speaking of, I kind of showed you it, but this has been one of the reasons that I hate DualShocks too, is with the analog stick. So there's no piece that just has the D-pad. And that was another thing that I loved about the FC4, is that it was pure D-pad. It was not meant for you to play other stuff, for you to have analog sticks and play games that have that. This can do both, but this needs to get out of the way. In fact, I was talking about the DualShock 1s. What I used to do is, because in Tag 1, and I think this was true in Tag 2 as well, the analog stick, if you hit it, it was a tag. That was the input. I actually think in Tag 2, the left analog stick was movement, like it would allow you to move. Not in Tag 1. It was, at least I don't think so. I think it was a tag. I know the right analog for sure was a tag button, which is one of the reasons that I don't want the analog at all over here, because God knows what it'll be set to. But I just don't want to bump into it when I'm using the D-pad. And you can just pop it off. Like, the top little piece. So that you can just pop it off, and if you want it back on, you just pop it back on. But what's awesome is that they not only give you, you know, different stuff, but they give you extra. Oh, this piece doesn't come out, but you have like different lengths. So that's super long for the analog. And then you have that for the D-pad styles as well. You have different gauges that you can use for those modular pieces if you want to. There's a lot of like customization that's possible with this thing. And that's another thing that's potentially really awesome about what, like, I'm hoping that this thing, so far it seems like it's really popular, but I'm hoping that it stays popular, because there's no reason that they have to stick with these three modular pieces. Like, they could design something completely new for buttons or D-pads or whatever, and just keep putting them out. Like, say, hey, do people like this style? Do people like that style? So it's really, the potential of it is really awesome. But moving on, this thing, I mean, it has just a ton of features. Like, so I mentioned the wired aspect. You can turn it to wired or wireless mode, but if you're going to play in a tournament setting, it's hard to underestimate the value of having a controller that has that mode, that, or even better, is wired only. Like that, again, that was the thing that was great about the FC4, is that it was wired only. It had no wireless ability at all. Now this can be wireless, but it's clear that they were thinking about a tournament environment and that you can actually switch it to a wired mode, which if you use a DualShock, you can, you know, obviously hook it up wired, but you still, I'm pretty sure, I don't think they've fixed this at all or changed it, but I'm pretty sure that the DualShocks still do things wirelessly, or like send signals wirelessly, even when they're plugged in. And when the PS3 first hit, and people were using the wireless functionality, it was a new feature with the DualShocks. It actually caused a bunch of issues at tournaments when you had lots of PS3s all in one place and a lot of controllers trying to connect wirelessly. There were a few instances of chaos because the wireless functionality with that many systems in one place was a big deal. But now it's just better. Like, if you can, you want to avoid anything that has to do with wireless, because you just don't want to run into those issues. So that's great. It also has a tournament mode, which a red light will pop up here, but it disables your system buttons, so no accidental presses when that's on, which is fantastic. It has built-in trigger stops. This is one of my biggest critiques of DualShocks, and I know that you can buy trigger stops. I don't think it's built in yet, even with the DualShock 5. Maybe it is. But built-in trigger stops, like this thing on DualShocks is awful. I hate these trigger buttons so much. So having that stop in there, that's just it's built into the controller, and you can turn it or adjust it or whatever you want to do. But I have it, so it can't. You can hear the button, but it's not going down at all, barely. These back buttons, so it has them, but again, you can turn them off. Huge plus for me. And then yeah, I think and then it has a bunch of other customization things that you can do with it, with like the computer app and whatnot. But so now we get to kind of the criticisms of this thing, and the reason that I can't give it a 10 out of 10. The first is an obvious one. They haven't, as far as I can tell, they haven't put the replacement pieces up for sale yet. So until that happens, then there's a big question mark. Like, you're already spending almost 200, unless you find it on sale. You're already spending almost $200 on this thing. And if this goes out, if one of the like if you're putting significant time into it and the D-pad or the buttons go out, then you're screwed. And the reason that I say that you're screwed is because maybe if you contact customer service, they will send you a replacement part or allow you to purchase a replacement part. But that's the second big criticism, is that the support seems to be pretty nil. I've seen multiple people mention on Twitter, like ask the company questions and they don't respond. I had a question, a small question, and I used their form on their website because I couldn't find an email. Maybe it's out there and I just need to look again. But it said that somebody would get back to me in a couple days. It's been a week and a half, something like that, and I haven't heard anything. So the customer service doesn't seem to quite be there. And with their controllers, so the company that makes this is PDP Gaming, something like that. They have other controllers, a lot of other controllers that they make, really high quality ones. I think they have like a stick that's Evo, not qualified, Evo standard or something like that. So they make quality products, and they have a PC app that you can install that allows you to customize all your buttons. Like if you wanted to move them around in some other way, the app will let you do that. It doesn't work with this. The app, I actually found two different apps. There's one that they recommend or send you to if you go through their website, and there's another one that you can just search for on the Windows Store. But it won't register this controller. Like it doesn't acknowledge that the controller is plugged in, even though it works fine with like games and whatnot. So that app, which is looks like a really cool feature. I have no other controllers from them, so I don't know how cool it is or how exactly it works. But that kind of additional customization would be awesome for a controller like this. And if you're planning on using it for tournament, would be exceptionally useful, I would think. But it doesn't work with this controller. And I've seen a couple people on Twitter ask the company about this, like, when is that going to be ready? When is that going to be available? And I haven't seen any address to any response to that question. So it begs the question, like, how good can you expect their customer service to be if they're just not answering basic questions like that? But the thing that like makes me most excited about the controller are these modular features, or these modular pieces that are on the controller, and being able to move them around and adjust them how you want them to be. But that feature, for the cost, is probably going to be a big negative for some people if they don't sell the pieces separately, or they don't continue to try to design new pieces or whatever it might be. So those seem like small fixes. Like from a business perspective, it seems like those should be really easy things to fix. Like customer service it's a lot easier than businesses make it out to be. You just have to have people there, and you have to be able to institute policies and just back them up. Like, just don't be douchebags. And then making those spare parts, that one might be a bigger hurdle for them, because I think, I can't remember the exact reason, or I don't know if I saw the exact reason for why these things got delayed. But if it was just a quality control issue, then that shouldn't be an issue going forward for selling the spare parts. But if it was something where like production was backed up or something like that, then that could signal a bigger issue if it's going to be months, maybe even year plus, multiple years, for when you might be able to buy spare parts for that. So I think that they are easily fixable issues, and you would definitely make this thing a 10 out of 10. Now, I will say, I put in a few weeks in this at this point, but that's still not enough time to determine longevity. So we'll see how long these pieces last, and if the D-pad stays really good for a long time, and it has the micro switches for the buttons, which are really awesome. This is actually the first time that I've used a controller that has those, and they're pretty neat. They're pretty cool. I'm not at all used to them, because they don't depress as far as like a normal PlayStation controller or anything else. So I feel like I might be a little rough with them sometimes, because I'm just not used to like these small clicks happening. But we'll see how long those last. But if those spare parts aren't available, then that might cause me some headaches later down the road. But I've been playing a lot again lately, and it's been really fun with this controller. I'm still getting back into the groove of things, because I did take some time off there and wasn't playing a whole lot. And this controller so far is hitting all the right marks, and it's been really good. And it's cool that you can easily swap these out, and if you wanted to play not a fighting game or just a regular casual game or whatever, you just swap out in that other piece. You have both your analogs ready to go, and you can play any other game like you normally would with it. So it's a really cool controller. And I guess I should say, since we're coming to the end of this video, I'm not being sponsored, by the way. This is just me because it's rare. I've tried a bunch of controllers to try to find something that would work for me. I know I've tried a couple of high quality or more of the expensive Razer controllers. There was one, I can't remember the name of it. It wasn't like a major brand, but one that was really hyped up that was kind of expensive and just didn't work. But yeah, I've just been on the hunt for a really good controller, and it seems like we might have finally got one. I might have finally got one, so I can put some more time in the game and kind of get myself back to where I was skill wise, execution wise. Yeah, just a fun little video. So for anyone who's looking at this and thinks as I did when I first saw it that it looks super cool, it is super cool. The modular feature of it is just amazing. Like, I can't express how cool that is, just to be able to unscrew it real quick, flip it around, put a new, swap out the pieces, whatever. But I would, those couple criticisms that I have, I would, warn people about that. For the price tag, it might not be for everybody. And it's clear that they designed this with a tournament in mind. So, hopefully most of the people that are on this channel watching this are looking for stuff that's competitive in nature, right? That's the whole purpose of this channel, is to give you guys guides and stuff. Like, you're not going to use any of that knowledge unless you're trying to be competitive with the game. So if that's not your shtick, and you don't need a controller for that purpose, maybe just skip this. It's not necessary. But for those of you that are looking, especially for a good 6-button layout controller, this thing is awesome. So I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I hope as time goes that they fix those couple things, maybe get a little better customer service and what have you, and fix that app, that PC app, because I'd like to play with that, because there are a couple of things that I'd like to do with my top buttons here, like adjust what inputs they are, because it's supposed to let you do that. You can like customize the inputs even more than just swapping out pieces and whatnot. So I'm hoping that they fix that, because I want to play around with that app. But yeah, cool controller. So I recommend it, but with the caveat that it might not be for everybody, and there is that long-term risk if they can't offer spare parts or whatever it might be. But yeah, that's it. So that's my review. 8 out of 10 with potential to be higher, although potential to be lower in the future. We have to see how they work. But yeah, so there you go. That's my review of the Victrix Pro BFG. So yeah, expect more guides here in the near future. I put out that primer for Josie not that long ago. I plan on doing more of those, because that's probably the first stretch of videos once Tekken 8 releases. Though that will probably be the format. So I might end up tweaking that format a little bit depending on what pops up. But those are the videos that you will likely see first for Tekken 8, and then as the game matures and everyone has time to test things and we get more information, then we'll get more of the intermediate guides that have more information in them. But I still want to test out those primers. I still want to do those. I think those are really good right now for this final stretch of Tekken 7. Just for people who want to jump in the game and get ready for Tekken 8, who maybe haven't played much Tekken, I'm hoping those primers are really good. But as always, thank you to our patrons. you know, you guys are awesome. I keep saying it and I will never stop saying it. And then to everyone else that visits the channel, I thank you guys so much for your views and your support. And I hope that you are finding the videos useful. But otherwise, as always, everyone stay safe and we'll catch you next time.